Welcome to another episode of the Emerging Markets Entrepreneur. Today, please welcome my guest, Dylan Piatti. He is the current Managing Director of Africa for the Advantage Group, and he's a board member at E-Commerce Forum Africa. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, Sid Wahi, my co-host, is currently not available, so please, everyone, excuse this. But I'm trying my best to compensate for it, and I'm sure Dylan will do the same. So Dylan, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey. You started you've been very long at Deloitte. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your career, where you're at right now, and some background.
Yeah, certainly. Alex, I've had a bit of a checkered career. I've bounced between entrepreneurship, launching the first retail store of its kind in Africa in my mid-20s, early 20s, had no idea what we're doing, learned as we went. We had this was 2001, we had the financial crisis because of September 11, the attacks in New York and how that affected the exchange rate. So we had big learnings around cash is king and getting locked up in cash getting locked up in stock and how that impacts running a business, especially when you've got all your creditors come knocking at the door. Launched a small fashion label, dabbled in that, had no idea what we were doing, but had fun. And then moved into a bit of professional sports overseas, which was quite a kind of relief experience. Launched a skincare brand, international skincare brand called Pavonia Botanica in South Africa, which was very, very interesting, taking a multinational high-end brand to try and compete with the local market, brand new, completely different arena for me. And then went into publishing. And we launched Estetica. I don't know if you might have heard of it, but our clients are L'Oreal, Wella, etc. It's an international hair and fashion magazine. You can see, very much my arena, that. So I had a great time dabbling, and then moved into SaaS. I was co-founding chairman of Mobile Monday in South Africa, and we moved into evangelizing mobile-led economy and engagement in South Africa. The company I was part of did the first mobile marketing advertising campaigns in South Africa, and that was incredibly interesting. And then found myself suddenly at Deloitte, which was a complete change. My first kind of corporate. Loved it. Worked in the consumer industry across sub-Saharan Africa. Really incredible teams. And on the journey, I ended up joining the E-Commerce Forum Africa, and I was chairman of the board for 4 years. And that really opened up a passion of mine around the digital economy on the continent and promoting this concept of Africa's movement into the future through leveraging digital economy. So access not only to intra-African trade, but access to the rest of the world. And the experiences I've had through there have been incredible. I'm sure some of those stories will bring out and those learnings through this conversation.
Wow, Dylan. Wow.
What about where I'm now?
I didn't expect this after going through your LinkedIn profile, and I'm sure no one actually did. A true entrepreneur, as we can see here. And I think one learning already here for everyone is there's not one way. You can do a lot of different things, and you can still go to Deloitte and then become a managing director of a global consulting firm. So well done and really inspirational here. So let's really dive into what's happening. So, April lockdown, now a lot of companies are back up and running in South Africa and globally, but now actually, especially in Europe and the US, second lockdowns are sort of initiated and they become stricter and stricter now over time. So as an entrepreneur, in particular in South Africa, what are sort of the changes that you've seen and that you are globally also seeing that entrepreneurs should consider?
I mean, how long is a piece of string? But what's been so interesting over this period, and with this organization that I'm now involved in, we've actually been talking primarily to retailers and manufacturers, so the big brands. Our clients are the Unilevers, Tiger brands, Mondelez, Nestle's, Coca-Cola's, GSK's, etc. And you work with the retailers across multiple markets. And this is one area in COVID that has still seen attention and growth, especially in some of the sectors. And as a result of that, we're seeing the emergence of significant opportunities for entrepreneurs who want to take the gaps. In South Africa, we've seen Bottles, which was just recently purchased by the Pick n Pay group. And again, this is a on-demand delivery service for traditional brick and mortar retailers. Now, what that's also opening up, though, is opportunities in logistics as a service. Multiple competitors, you're saying, well, hang on, if we can have entry from these kind of service providers, we can have additional providers who can serve specific niches in the market. And the other outcome of that, and you look at especially the food side, food and drink side, and something we're seeing in South Africa has been existing in, I'm talking to colleagues in England at the moment, have been existing there for a while, but the rise of dark kitchens. Now, the dark kitchen concept, let's look beyond the dark kitchen as such, because just food. But what it's saying is, how do we create a centralized service that looks after multiple providers to an overlap of consumers? So I think I'm buying from Alex, I think I'm buying from David, or I think I'm buying from whatever individual or company, but it's all being run through the same shared service essentially. And each of those companies is getting efficiencies by sharing those operational structures, distribution systems, and production mechanisms.
So you're mentioning a couple of sort of pockets of opportunity, I would call them right now in the industries, which is retail, logistics, and certainly also some food delivery services. But aren't these exceptions?
When you say exceptions, what do you mean by that?
I mean, isn't the norm right now that most industries are struggling and I mean, they're barely making ends meet?
Yeah. So yeah, there's challenges, but what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is finding an opportunity. And when do you create more opportunity? When there's hardship, because that forces us to think in a different way. We need to change our mental models, shift our paradigms, and see the world through a new lens. And with that, we start identifying opportunities that, to be honest, what you just identified and what I shared, those should have been happening anyway, because there were gaps in the market, but they only got accelerated because of circumstance.
Because the traditional models aren't working anymore, or aren't working temporarily at least.
Exactly. And we talk about what this does. So the Uberization of opportunity is really what it's done. And what it's done is created a precedent in the way that we can start thinking about opportunity. I sit on an advisory board, and we look at a monthly cohort of entrepreneurs who pitch to us across Central, East, and Western Africa. And it's incredible to see, specifically in Ghana as an example, where they're looking at tapping into the fishing market and the snail market of all things. There are over 20,000 tons of snails consumed in Ghana per year, apparently, which blew my mind. But what they've said is, how do we take the concept of delivery on demand or access, the Uberization, and link this into our communities to access fish, to access produce, to access snails? And I think that without that kind of precedent that was set, we wouldn't be thinking in that manner. And there's so much opportunity because we don't have leaders in these markets, or they are completely untapped because they're still working on traditional systems. And wherever you have a traditional system, you've got an opportunity to bring in a technology layer and completely change the game.
So this Uberization is basically a two-sided platform, right? Bringing a two-sided platform into a traditional market. But aren't there also a lot of, I would say, social costs to a two-sided platform, A, and B? I mean, most two-sided platforms, they don't work out. If we're honest, because both sides need to scale at the same time, almost simultaneously, in order for both sides to have value from it. Without changing the product, just by scaling the sides, the whole product needs to become more valuable. And a lot of companies fail with it.
Absolutely. And I think that's all got to do with where you're wanting to play. and how you're going to play. So the opportunity or the interesting concept in this, let's take the fish one, is saying, we've got a consumer base that is used to eating fish, and they'll go to these markets, and all the fish are laid out, and you choose your fish, and you take it home and go cook it. But now you've got those suppliers, who are the fishermen, who are either, more often than not, are giving it to a middleman, and that's the person then who then distributes it either for wholesale or direct to customer through, or consumer through the markets. If you create that opportunity to enhance everyone in that value chain through a technology platform and a data-driven platform, then fantastic. But you face the challenge of adoption. You face the challenge of getting these players on board, taking them through this journey of socialization and saying, yes, I can trust this mechanism. And at the end of the day, I am going to get money out. Because if wherever I'm in the value chain, when there isn't technology, I'm giving you a product and you're basically giving me that cash. I'm seeing it, I'm touching and feeling it. When I'm not touching and feeling it, you get a certain level of fear that comes into play. And that's a massive challenge in terms of overcoming that. But there is opportunity, because we're seeing how Uber, again, that concept is driving adoption in other areas. We're also seeing how online payments or digital payments are increasing across the continent. And with that, we know that trust being one of the biggest hurdles to its accelerated adoption. But with that, we are seeing people being more open to engaging. And that's also one of the positive outcomes of this terrible pandemic we've been through, is significant increase in uptick, not only in e-commerce, but in digital engagement, purchasing, shopping, connectivity.
Okay. So basically, if I'm an entrepreneur now, and I'm looking at my industry right now, and it's sort of not looking great, your suggestion would be, take the lens of Uber, take the lens of digital transformation, and look at your entire business model very critically, and look at which side, from your supplier side or from your consumer side, can you digitally transform. How do you choose which one you're taking? Do you have any criteria how to say it makes more sense in that direction or in that direction?
Look, the two approaches I think that you could take, depending on where you're sitting, and where you're sitting is influenced by access to resources, funding, networks. So one is to go and say, okay, I'm going to map out the different kind of ecosystems, and choose a couple of areas and say, well, these are some of the ecosystems. And I actually met a Russian entrepreneur who did this and became a multi-millionaire. He basically started the concept of booking.com in Russia. And he said to me, Dylan, I sat down, he went to a top-end English university, and he sat down with some friends, said, how do we make $1 million in the fastest possible way? And they mapped out all these different existing kind of businesses and said, well, how do we replicate and enhance in a different market? And he took an existing business and took it into the Russian market. So now, access to resources to do that, etc. Fine. The other way is to say, okay, what is it that I'm currently working in? So let me look closer to home. What is it that I know? And let me map out that ecosystem and the value chains. Because more often than not, what we think we know is much less than what we actually know. And what I mean by that is you need to map out the entire value chain from downstream to upstream. And then, and this is a systems thinking approach, is to then link every other aspect that influences that ecosystem. Once you've mapped that out, you can start looking for efficiencies and say, okay, now where might I play with the technology solution? I think, Alex, one of the big things when we talk about technology adoption and this Uber thing is we're thinking about something that's going to just absolutely exponentially take over and become this massive business. It doesn't have to be that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. It's look for the weak link, basically. Look for the bottleneck in your own value chain, and then start working on your own bottleneck within the value chain, and try to deploy resources towards that bottleneck. It's almost like a manufacturing approach, right?
It's a systems approach.
Yeah. All right.
Systems approach, absolutely.
And so I personally, as an entrepreneur, and I'm looking at the global pandemic right now, and I'm looking at what's happening. I'm looking at South Africa, and I'm thinking, when is the next lockdown going to hit us? And how resourceful should I be, and how risk averse should I be versus how much should I be investing right now? How would you, or how are you making this decision in terms of what decision to take in an environment that is as uncertain as it has never been?
Yeah, I think you have to be risk averse, right? But risk aversion is not about investing, because how you invest is now what becomes clever. What it is doing is forcing us to really consider what is a priority and what is not. And in fact, I had this conversation 2 days ago with an entrepreneur. He's got a successful property company, and he was talking about his growth strategy and the things to watch out for. He says, if you have to invest, where do you invest ahead of the curve or behind the curve? And he said that he believes, and I tend to agree with him, you want to invest ahead of the curve for growth. So if you have to pick in your business, it's about how do you create efficiencies that are going to help you to grow top line revenues, not where to invest to create efficiencies in the back end. And that's if you have to choose. Ideally, you want to be able to do both.
Of course.
But if you have the markets, so there's a concept that we told at Deloitte is you got to get momentum, and direction will follow, and you got to build the plane while you fly it. But in order to do that, you've got to get passengers on board. You've got a reason to be there. And I think sometimes we get stuck on trying to focus and making everything work perfectly in the back end, which is a danger for entrepreneurs.
So you basically saying there's so much changing right now. You need to work on finding new business model, new ways of approaching your clients to drive top line, and worry about the bottom line later on.
Yes, of course. That's, and you got to look at it in context. That would be my immediate gut, but we'd have to assess your business and go, well, do you have funding that can, have downtime because maybe your sector is not growing here, and you have sufficient funding? Then you got a different approach because of your context. But yes, I would consider that. I do think, the other question around, well, what do I do if the industry or sector I'm in at the moment is stagnant or declining? We have to ask why. And again, I would suggest doing that value chain and ecosystem mapping process, systems thinking approach, because that might help you unpack what is driving that and where that bottleneck might be. And in turn, it might open up opportunities for you to pivot your business.
To generate an idea, to experiment with different types of business model, different types of approaches.
Yes, but it's still within your ecosystem. So essentially, you should have the resources and the structures there to be able to pivot efficiently.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, when you're sitting in that shoes now and you have to make decisions, how do you experiment with these things? I mean, experimenting always means, fail fast and with the lowest amount of resources, possible. But I mean, how do you actually do this? How do you have certain examples of how companies have been able to test these different, top line strategies or different types of business models effectively?
So what we're really talking about is how do you de-risk managing through disruption?
Correct.
As much as possible. And the one big learning that I've had when I look back is I always thought I had to do it myself. And that is my biggest thing I would change, is you can learn from others without having to trying to do it yourself. So create an ecosystem that you can lean on, whether it's an advisory board or specific mentors within the industry or in adjacent industries that you can go to and talk through your ideas and basically take an approach of, well, these are the things that I know I shouldn't do, versus trying to take an approach of what must I do. So you can filter out the things that you know you shouldn't take that direction. And by doing that, you're getting closer to what the right direction will be.
So basically derive hypotheses from your close network, from mentors, from the industry in order to derive a more soundproof hypothesis.
Yes, there's this incredible, if I recall correctly, it's called cyberkinetic thinking, and I'm doing it in a postgrad around how do you improve your decision making, and it's based on the concept of robotics. So when scientists, engineers build a robot, and they have to build this mechanical arm that has to, for example, pick up a bottle or do some intricate kind of labor-intensive initiative or whatever it is. They don't program it to go, this mechanical hand has to pick up the bottle. It's programmed to adjust in real time, to go, that's incorrect, that's incorrect, that's incorrect, until it gets to the correct thing to do. And essentially that's what we're trying to say, is how do we get rid of all those incorrect things? So naturally we start finding ourselves going towards the best thing to do.
Yeah. And I think in these times, to add to what you're saying, is I think really focus on one particular thing that you really believe in and that you have a sound hypothesis. And I think focusing on too many things at the same time in these challenging times will set up many entrepreneurs for failure. That's when you're splitting yourselves into 5 people, it never works out, basically.
Yes, because there is also a huge mental toll to this lockdown and stress outside of work that we kind of completely undervalue a lot of the time.
And so what is your final advice for entrepreneurs, small business owners in this unprecedented time?
It's the typical one. Just don't give up. Don't give up. The number of entrepreneurs who pull back when they're actually on the edge of making a new leap is astounding. Don't give up, and you're not on your own. Don't let yourself feel you're on your own, and don't think you have to do everything on your own.
Yeah, there's nothing better to end this episode. And Churchill would say, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. So I hope everyone here, let's keep all the head above the water. Thank you, Dylan, for joining, and all the best with all your endeavors. And I hope you're going to found a lot of new companies in the next 20, 30 years that are going to disrupt Africa.
Yes, that'll be amazing to see. The interest, though, in Africa is increasing significantly. I think global capital has readjusted their thinking of the thresholds, and the number of conversations having with even the African diaspora, especially in the States, the amount of money that they're willing to put back in the continent, we're going to see an uptick in small to medium scale entrepreneurial enterprises, and then also obviously at the top end your bigger companies. So it's going to be an exciting place.
So everyone who needs money, please contact Dylan. He's got a lot of good contacts here, and he will try his absolute best to fuel your growth. Thank you, Dylan, for this conversation, and all the best.
Thank you so much. Cheers.